You've landed inside LaunchStreet, the business innovation podcast, where we interview top innovators out there shaking things up so you can innovate, differentiate, and get further faster. Since you're here, we know you're the type of person that recognizes the importance of unlocking your innovation advantage so you can compete and win. And now, your host, the person that has worked with leading companies like Disney, Procter & Gamble, Aero Electronics, the U.S. Army Research Labs, and Red Robin on upping their innovation advantage, Tamara Ghandour.
Hey, LaunchStreet, Tamara here, your host. So I was checking out the podcast numbers the other day, the listens or downloads, and it occurred to me that there are thousands upon thousands actually of you across the globe, which first of all, thank you. I'm so honored and excited. But there are thousands of you who are new to LaunchStreet or have come into the community recently. And I thought I would take a moment to say hi and give you a little bit of background and journey. There's some of you out there who've been with me since the beginning, or at least from the kind of front end, who kind of know a little bit more of the story and the arc and how we got to where we are today. But for those of you that were new, I thought we could get a chance to get to know each other. So I thought I would take a moment and tell you a little bit about me, some personal stuff, but also how I became obsessed with innovation as a key to human potential and to personal and professional and business success. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So let me tell you a little bit about me personally. I actually grew up in Northern California, so all over the Bay Area. So while I'm not a Valley girl, I am definitely a Cali girl, and I'm sure you can hear it in my accent, or I guess some would say lack of accent. And now I live in Colorado with my two boys. They're 11 and 15, and my 90-pound mastiff of a dog named Zoe, who we call the cuddle monster because she wants to sit on you like she is a lap dog. So now I live in Colorado. I was actually born with dual citizenship. So I was born in Israel, and we moved back to the U.S. when I was five, but I was born with both Israeli and American passports. So I feel very fortunate actually to have both. And, you know, in between Cali and Colorado, I lived in New York for 6 years. And I'll talk a little bit about that journey too. But I've been in Colorado since 2001, which is hard for me to believe because I think this is the longest I've been anywhere. So Colorado is home, and it's a great place to live. But going back to my childhood for a second, I would say that if you asked my teachers about me, they'd say I was a little bit on the disruptive side, not in the sense of like doing illegal things or bad things, but just always doing things differently and always challenging. I'll never forget, I had to stay after class once because I'm left-handed and they wanted me to write with my right hand. And not only would I not write with my right hand, which is silly now looking back, but I also wouldn't put my name at the top right portion of the paper, which is where they wanted you to put it. I don't remember why that was the case, but that was the rule. So I would always put it on the top left just because I felt like, well, nobody has told me why it has to be on the top right, so I'm not going to put it there. My poor teachers. But I was definitely a disruptive child. In fact, my family always laughs at me, and to this day they laugh at me, and they always say that, oh, Tamara, you admit that there are rules, you just don't think they apply to you, which is probably true and has probably been a little bit of the key to the frustration that people in my life has felt, but also a little bit of the key to my success because I tend to look at the rules and go, well, why? Well, how come? And let's see if we can do it differently. It's kind of been my experience that the rules are typically somebody else's way of doing things, but it doesn't mean it has to be yours. So if there is a rule, I'm going to challenge it and I'm going to break it. And I would say that probably sums up my entire childhood right there. The rules don't apply to me. Still does. So I went to UC Berkeley, and after Berkeley, I decided I wanted to be on Madison Avenue because at that time in the 90s, that's where all the incredible creative was coming out of. So it was kind of very Mad Men-like. So I upped and left and moved to New York without a job. I had an apartment, but I did not have a job, and landed one on Madison Avenue in advertising at what was then the second largest global agency. Just to be clear, I was the lowest of the low of the totem pole. I was an account manager, which basically meant, I wasn't even an account manager. I was an account coordinator. That's been a while since I thought about this, which basically meant I was lucky if I got to make coffee and, make copies of things. Very important job, bottom of the bottom. But I loved it. And I loved being in New York City. And in fact, that's where I met Steve. And Steve was the reason I became obsessed with innovation. But I'll come back to that. I'll tell you more about Steve and what happened there. But we'll get to that in a minute. So after advertising at the ripe age of, 23, maybe I was 23, I and a colleague of mine, actually, who was also account coordinator, decided one late night at 1:00 in the morning when we were still at the office that we clearly at the ripe age of 23 knew more than everybody else. We were going to start our own little company called the Insight Group, because we had decided that all those little shops in New York City needed our marketing help, our Madison Avenue brilliance and sophistication. So looking back, it's so silly, but basically every day we would walk blocks to get to the subway, get on the subway, get off the subway, walk some more blocks, and we'd pass all these little shops in New York City. And we were sure they needed our help because every 3 months the shops would turn over. So the eyeglass shop would then become a clothing shop, and then it was a candy store, and then it was a restaurant, and then it was a bookstore. Like New York City, I think the streets of New York City are some of the most competitive places in the world for business, because you got to capture people's attention who do not care. They are getting from point A to point B with their heads down. So you got to figure a way to even get them in the store to begin with, and then actually keep them and have them come back. So, and actually, frankly, I think that the streets of New York are a great analogy for business in general and the competitive and cluttered marketplace that we all play in. But that was my experience. So I thought, all these shops clearly need me. So we set up shop in my tiny little unair conditioned apartment in August. And we did that for about a year. We did not get far. Actually, we didn't get anywhere, to be honest. We bombed, but it was an awesome experience trying to hawk it. It's where I learned the value of sales, listening to your customers, the language that they use, the nuances of the business. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was an incredible failure, and experience, and I learned a lot from it. And it actually got me a job at a very prestigious brand strategy and innovation firm in New York City. I think they liked the hustle, not just the experience, but the hustle I was willing to do to make things happen. I'm sure you've experienced that in your life, where you look at someone and you go, they may not have the exact experience I'm looking for, but there's something in them, a hunger, a hustle, a desire, a goal. That's something to be paid attention to. And I was fortunate enough that this company and the CEO of the company who interviewed me saw that. So I got this job at this brand strategy and innovation firm, and it took me to England to live for about 6 months. It had me working on big brands like IBM, and it was awesome. But, I'm a restless person, as you could probably tell. So after a little while, I jumped over to a company called Vigilante, which was one of the only at the time urban marketing firms. Here's what I'll tell you about that experience. I had the most amazing mentor. So my boss was actually in Chicago at our parent company, which was called Leo Burnett. And his name was Mike Hall. And I'll never forget, here I am working at this company. I'm 27. I'm the youngest executive on the team. I've got a colleague who's kind of my partner in crime on all of this. And we're supposed to build this strategy department and land new business and hit all these big goals. And I'll never forget one night, Mike and I were having drinks after I had to fly to Chicago to present to him. And I said, I was complaining about something, I'm sure, because I was 27. And what else do you do when you're 27 but complain about how the world is not paying attention to you and your ideas? And I was complaining about something. And he said something so powerful to me. He's like, Tamara, screw that. He said, you know what? All you need to do is get yourself on the playing field, because when you get on the playing field, you can win. And he was telling me about himself. And he said, you know what? It doesn't matter what game I'm playing. As long as I get on that field, I'm going to win, because I'm going to work harder and I'm smarter and I'm more strategic and more innovative than the rest of the people out there. And he meant it. He was not kidding. He said, I don't care what disadvantage or what detriment I'm coming from. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to play my hardest. That was a defining moment for me, because it really made me realize how important it was to get out there and to play the game, whatever that game is that you're playing. So Michael, if you're out there, thank you. That was probably one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten, and I've never forgotten it. So after Vigilante, I decided it was time to leave New York City. I love New York. I think everyone should live in a big city at some point in their lives, but it was time to move on, which is how I ended up in Denver. And in fact, when I first moved to Denver, I decided I was going to work at REI, the outdoor gear clothing store, because I wanted to make friends, and I fancied myself as a bit of an outdoor person. It turns out that walking 6 miles in heels with a martini in your hand in New York City is not the same as climbing a 14,000 foot mountain. And Denver and Colorado and the altitude and the sun showed me very quickly what it really meant to be fit. So thanks for that, Colorado. I'll never forget my first 14er. I went up and I had to take Claritin because I think I was having allergies. And I got to the top and almost passed out. And my boyfriend at the time was like, no, let's keep going. I was like, no, I need to sit down for a minute because I was about to pass out. It was horrible. So but ever since that moment, Denver has been home. So it's been, as you can tell, a bit of a circuitous journey all the way along. And, after I worked at REI for a little while and made some really great friends and learned about the outdoors, I got a job at another innovation firm. And that's where I had this experience with Johnson & Johnson in baby care that also changed how I viewed innovation and is a big reason we developed the assessment that you all know about, the Innovation Quotient Edge, that tells every person how their unique style of innovation. It's why we created tools that focused on people, not process. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. So that's kind of the journey. Now let me dig into why I'm so obsessed with innovation, why I think all of us, frankly, should be so obsessed. And as I mentioned earlier, it actually started with someone named Steve. So this is when I was that lowly account coordinator at the ad agency on Madison Avenue in New York City. And I was responsible for very important tasks like inter-office mail and copies and coffee. But I had this incredible boss. I got, it's funny now that I'm talking, it seems like I had a lot of those in my day. So if you're out there and you're that incredible boss to someone else, just thank you. And if you have one of those, say thank you to them. Having those type of champions in your life make a huge difference. They propel you forward a lot faster than you realize. All right, that was a bit of a tangent. Going back to my incredible boss in particular, Anita May was her name, by the way. So Anita, if you're out there, hi, it's been a while. So Anita saw potential. And she one day said to me, Tamara, I'm going to put you in charge of the big meeting. And the big meeting was the big creative meeting. That was the meeting where everybody who worked on the brand that we were assigned to came together to determine the creative strategy for the next year. So it was the clients, of course, account management, which is the kind of team I was in, the creatives, the account coordinators, the media buy, the production people, everybody who touched the brand in any way. And in fact, the most important person to be there was Steve. Steve was the creative director. Now, Steve was the guy with the brilliance, the mojo, the creative ahas that we all just hoped we would be around to hear. I used to carry a notepad and pen, and if I was lucky, I was in a meeting where he'd said something brilliant, and I could write it down and go execute on it. Do you have that person in your business? It's like that person that everybody just looks for all the innovative ideas, while the rest of us just sit there and go, oh, well, we're not the innovative ones. That's for that firm, that person or this person with a cool streak in their hair and the funky glasses. Yeah. Well, that was Steve. And Steve was brilliant. And so basically what this meeting was an opportunity for us to all sit around the table and for Steve to share his brilliance and for all of us to applaud and go, yay, we have our creative strategy. Yay, Steve. Okay, so I'm put in charge of this meeting. So I reserve the conference room. I get the coffee and the snacks. I get everybody invited. I triple check that everybody's going to be there. I am so proud of myself for taking on this big task. This was my day to shine. I even got a few minutes. Anita said, you could have a few minutes to open up the meeting. So great. So the day rolls around. I get there early. The coffee's there. It's hot. The snacks are there. The conference table is there. There's an easel pad with pens on both sides of the table so that when Steve says something brilliant, one of us can run up to the easel pad and write it down right there and capture it. So I'm there. Clients roll in, kind of the higher up account management people roll in. They grab a cup of coffee. No Steve, but creatives are never early, right? So then the other people in account management roll in, then account coordinators, and then the accounting people who do the numbers and the media buy who buy the ads on TV, they all come in. Everybody's grabbing coffee. Some are on their second cup. Still no Steve, but creatives are never on time, so that's fine. 8:20, creatives are late. Now's about time for him to come in. 8:40, still no Steve. Now everybody's sitting around the conference table doing that awkward stare and arms crossed. And they're all looking at me like, where is Steve? So I start dialing for Steve. I call the production office. I call the 11th floor of the building where he has an office. I call everywhere. I finally get him at home. And I'm like, Steve, what's up? Where are you? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, today's the big day. Today's the meeting. You're supposed to be here. And he goes, oh, I just wasn't feeling the mojo today, so we're going to have to reschedule that. And he hung up on me. That's it. So I turned. I'm now sweating. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is my career. It's over. I sit down at the table. I've got nothing to say. Everybody's staring at me. I look at the ball and I say, well, Steve's not coming. And then I stopped because I had no solution. I thought I was done. I wanted to hide under the table. Then this awkward silence filled the room. And then the most amazing thing happened. First, someone from accounting looked up and said, hey, I know I just see the numbers, but it's led me to this. I've been seeing this pattern and it led me to this idea. And then someone from media buy looked up and was like, yeah, I've actually been seeing this interesting pattern how our competitors are buying media and it led me to this idea. Before I knew it, the room was bubbling with innovation. Everybody was thinking differently and creatively and innovatively, whichever word you want to use. And that day, we built a creative strategy that grew the business in years to come without Steve. And that was my first realization that, hey, innovation isn't for the select few. It isn't for the ones that we bestowed this like great title to, or it isn't the ones that, are born with something that the rest of us don't have or that have special titles. And it's actually something that we all have if we're given the room and the ability to unleash it. And it was that day 20 some years ago that unleashed my passion and my curiosity for how we as humans innovate. And I used to think that innovation was, first of all, something that you were born with or without, like either you had it or you didn't. I used to think it was tied to intelligence. Turns out, by the way, that the structure for intelligence in the brain and the structure for innovation in the brain are different. I like to think of it as the structure for intelligence is about kind of highways, deep grooves, like kind of very clear, distinct pathways. The structure for innovation is actually more like side roads, a bunch of loose connections across the whole brain. The beauty is, turns out, we have both. So this whole left brain, right brain thing is false. It turns out that innovation is a whole brain experience that we all have. And what I came to realize as I started to kind of dig into it is that it's not that some of us are innovative and some of us aren't. We're all innovative. In fact, being innovative is universal. We all do it. However, how we innovate is unique to each of us. We each have a different style of innovation, a way to unleash it. And I think part of the challenge that we face, and part of the reasons why we say things about ourselves like, I'm not innovative, is A, because we think it has to be done one way, right? The way we see on the Fast Company cover, cover the magazine, or what we hear in the news, or the leader who says to us, you all have to just be fearless and step outside your comfort zone because that's how they innovate. But it might not be you. You may innovate by asking questions. You may innovate by connecting dots. But we try to do it in this one way. The other thing I've really discovered over time is that we have trained ourselves out of being innovative. We have been taught from a very young age that there's a consequence to thinking different, to going outside the box, to, I hate that phrase actually, let me come up with a different one. That phrase drives me crazy. I like to say rearrange the box, but by the way. But, coloring outside the lines, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Kind of like my story about like getting in trouble for putting my name on the top left and not the top right. And I think it's true in business too, not just in education. We are trained into thinking like the culture we go into, like the group we go into, doing things the way they've always done them, the way our leaders did them. So I think it's a combination of not recognizing our uniqueness and how we innovate and trying to do it like somebody else and being trained out of it. We just simply have to get back into it. But Steve, and that experience in that conference room was my first realization of that, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Not just Steve. Steve doesn't actually hold all the answers. Steve isn't the end all be all. In fact, everybody in this room, the people who think about the business day in and day out from different angles, they all have brilliant ideas. They all have different perspectives as well. And that put me on a path to innovation. And that path has been a little bit circuitous. I shared at the beginning, kind of, New York City, Colorado, California, all that. But I really do believe that our ability to innovate as humans is the key to our living up to our potential. It's the key to stepping out of this cluttered world that we're in and standing out and rising above. I think it's the key to staying relevant in changing times. And I've seen that it provides people with that differentiation and that uniqueness they need to stand out. So that's the Steve story. He was the kind of crux of it all. But there's a second story I want to share with you too that I alluded to, which is the Johnson & Johnson story. And this is what tipped me over the edge. This is the experience that got me to jump ship from what I was doing and focus on innovation from the people perspective, not the process perspective. So as I mentioned, I used to be in an innovation company. And what that really means is I used to be hired, my companies were hired, the ones I worked for, to build new products for companies. So, General Mills would come to us and say, we need to rebrand our products, or we need to come up with new products, or Procter & Gamble would do the same, or any one of these companies would come to us and say, we need new products and services. So we had the honor of J&J coming to us and saying, we want to reinvent baby care. And it was amazing. I was so excited. I assembled the crack team. We went to work for 6 months. We played with baby toys. We checked out formula. We talked to dads, which at that point was one of the kind of first dad focus groups in J&J history. And after 6 months, we had created a range of products that we thought were going to just transform baby care and take J&J into the future. And they were close in, things that leveraged the manufacturing and the lines and the products they already had. And they were far out, things they'd have to invent or acquire in some way that would take them longer to get to market. We had a whole range. And they came from consumer insights and marketplace research and my team. I mean, it was an all-in effort. And I was really proud of my team. And so we flew to headquarters to give the big final presentation. And we shuffled into the CEO's conference room. Maybe you know the one. It's that conference room that has a big wood table and those old pastel-y chairs that kind of creak a little bit because they've been used for years too long. And I'll never forget, because on the wall there were oil paintings of CEOs past. And none of them were smiling. I couldn't help but stare at them. But I'm up at the podium for the presentation and my team is talking and I'm looking out, and on my right is my client, and then it's his boss behind him, and then the head of this department, the VP of that department. Basically all the important people were in the room, and my team is going through the ideas, and I am beaming with pride. I am like a mama bear. I'm so proud of them. And as they're going through though, I start to hear this whispering to the right of me, and it's not my client, it's his boss. And every idea he's leaning in and he's whispering to my client. And here's the thing about him. I don't remember his name, but I can tell you that he had a mustache so big that it moved when he spoke. And again, to date myself, he reminded me of Magnum PI. That's how bushy his mustache was. And with every idea, he would lean into my client and he would say things like, didn't we try that already and it failed? Didn't so-and-so in R&D look at that and it didn't work? Didn't another consultant give us that idea and we shelved it? Didn't a competitor look at that in the marketplace and it failed? Didn't we see something like that 5 years ago? He squashed the life out of every idea. And that was the longest, angriest plane ride home. And I went through the 12 steps of anger. In fact, I think I started at 7. I started with, well, how dare they hire us if they don't even want to listen to us? And then I went on to Mustache Man, and I was like, oh, how dare he? He should not be involved in innovation. He's way too jaded. When I get off this plane, I'm going to call J&J and tell them they should fire him. And then I moved on to my client. It's like, well, obviously, if he can't sell and get buy-in for his ideas internally at J&J, he shouldn't be leading innovation projects because he doesn't have the strongest voice. When I get off this plane, I'm going to call him and tell him he should be fired. And then I moved on to my poor team. And I thought, oh, clearly they snowed one over on me. Like, clearly these were not the best ideas and they made me believe it. And they were all horrible and they knew it all along. And it was actually the C team. And when I get off this plane, I'm going to fire them all before I get to baggage claim. Totally absurd, right? But fortunately for everybody, it was a long plane ride home. And by the time I landed in Denver, I realized who was really at fault. It was me. Here's the thing. My team and I and my client, who loved the ideas too, by the way, we had been working on this for 6 months. We had been pushing the boundaries. We had been testing the limits. We had been charged with being innovative and disruptive. So off we went behind the black curtain, and we did that. And then we shuffled into this room with a bunch of people who were coming in cold with their own to-do lists and their own agendas, and we expected them to get it. We were pushing our brilliance on them. They hadn't been thinking about it as much as we had, and we expected them to be as excited and on board as we were. And I really thank Mustache Man to this day, because what he taught me that day is that there's a language to innovation. And if you could change your language, you change your outcomes. It's one of our more popular videos on our toolkit online, our online library and innovation toolkit, because it tells you not just how to have more ideas, but how to get buy-in for those ideas, how to communicate them in a way that gets people on board. We don't have the time in this podcast to go over all the tools, the methods, I should say, in the language of innovation. There's actually 3 of them: open questions, pain and possibilities, and what's in it for them. But what I will tell you, the big aha for me coming out of that experience was that, the reason we didn't get buy-in for ideas is because they came from the outside in. There we were behind the black curtain, siloed innovation, doing our thing. And when I really started to look at all the projects, all the innovation, new pipeline projects I had been on over the years, of all those ideas that came out of there, very, very few of them actually got commercialized. Why? Because they weren't the people's ideas that were doing the work. They were my ideas or my team's ideas or the consultant's ideas. And that's when I realized that the power and the transformation wasn't going to happen by giving people decks with ideas. The transformation and the power was going to happen when I helped people realize their ability to innovate. When people realize how they can think differently about what's right in front of them. In fact, that's our definition for innovation here at LaunchStreet. What we work with our clients with is thinking differently about what's right in front of you to create an advantage. Because let's face it, we all have realities, right? What's right in front of us, the goals we have to hit, the tasks we have to complete, the teams that we're with, the money, the opportunities, the competition, the challenges. That's where there's massive opportunity to innovate and to win with what's right in front of you, thinking differently about what's right in front of you to create an advantage, whatever that advantage looks like. Beating the competition, outmaneuvering the changing marketplace, creating a process that streamlines things and saves money internally, whatever it is. But I thank Mustache Man to this day, because that experience is what pushed me over the edge and made me think, you know what, I'm done with this. I am so over giving people brilliant ideas that they're not doing anything with. And I used to blame them for it. Like, how dare they not take the ideas and do something with it? But the reality is the process was flawed. What we were doing was flawed. And it's so fascinating to me, because what I find now in a lot of the clients we work with, where we start by doing the IQE, we do the assessment with everybody, we get everybody to buy into how they're everyday innovators, how they innovate, how they contribute, how they add value, how they have a stronger voice, how they think differently. When we start there, and then we move our workshops into real world challenges they want to solve, and they're doing the work, I'm there facilitating and fostering, that's where the magic happens. That's where ideas actually turn into action. It's not when I go behind a black curtain and then come back and say, ta-da, you and your people are the ones thinking about your work every single day, and you have it in you. We just have to figure out, hey, what's your style of innovation? Let's leverage the heck out of your strength. And then let's apply that to a challenge that you have. So that's a little bit about me. I think the one last thing I'll tell you, by the way, because it makes people laugh out loud. So, and I meant to mention it in the beginning, but I forgot is, but it's going to come out somewhere, is as a kid in computer camp. That's right. I went to computer camp as a kid. In fact, I went to Atari computer camp 2 summers in a row, where I learned to code video games. I'm not a coder anymore, and I couldn't do it, but I will say that having gone to computer camp made me less fearful of technology. I'm pretty much willing to play with anything. But here's the best part. I'll end on this. I wasn't the best coder, so I didn't win for my games, but I did win the I'll Try Anything Once award, which is a motto I still try to live by. All right. Well, that's a little bit about me. I hope to get to know you better as well as we take this journey on LaunchStreet together. My big, hairy goal, whatever you want to call it, my dream in this world, what I am trying to do here with LaunchStreet is to unleash 1 million innovators into the world. Imagine the problems we could solve, the opportunities we'd create, the sense of satisfaction we'd all feel by being innovative. That's what I want. So I'm honored and excited that you're here as part of those 1 million. And I look forward to getting to that goal with you. Tamara, out.
Thanks for hanging with us on Inside LaunchStreet. If you know someone that is truly ready to unlock their innovation advantage, have them join you on LaunchStreet. Discover your innovation advantage. Build a team of high-performing innovators and ignite ideas and solutions that create massive impact. GOTO, LaunchStreet.com. Remember, innovators, if you don't take the leap, somebody else will.